Hello, fantasy football fans. Welcome to the premiere episode of the Nine Route, the fantasy football show that goes deep to help your fantasy team win. Feels great to be back on the podcast scene. I am your host, Austin Lee, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Alex Miglio. How you doing, buddy?
Hey Austin, I'm so excited. Football season is back, but I'm really excited to be back here talking to you because I really enjoyed that all last year, and I'm glad we're able to do it again this year.
Yes, it took us a little while to get our act back together and get back on the podcasting airwaves, but we've got our regular time slot worked out at 9 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday nights. We'll hit you once a week with insight from the previous week's games and give you some lead into the next weekend's games. So we're both writers at Football Guys, and Alex also does some writing over at Bleacher Report, and we're just excited to talk to everybody about some fantasy football because what's going on? Week 1 tomorrow, it starts up. How psyched are you, Alex?
Oh man, I just cannot wait for all of the off-season stupidity to be over. Just can't wait for the games to start, and then we actually have some tangible results to talk about, and that's the biggest thing for me.
Yes, totally. It's a very exciting time of year. Now, on tonight's show, we're going to cover some general Week 1 fantasy tips for you guys, and we're going to cover some of our rankings and where we differ and where we kind of agree on a guy that's very high in our rankings this week or a little bit lower in our rankings this week. And we're also going to talk about some streaming defenses and kickers and cover some players that we like over at DraftKings and FanDuel for you daily fantasy fiends out there, the grinders out there. That podcast has that fresh new podcast smell. I like it. I like it. Let's dive into some news, Alex. Talk to me a little bit about the big news that came out this week. Wes Welker being suspended the first 4 games. And then Denver has a bye in Week 4. So Welker's not going to play until Week 6. What do you think this does to the Denver landscape? How does it impact the other players? And what are you prognosticating for Welker's future there in Denver?
Well, I think this is big news for Welker. Obviously Welker because he's going to be out, but Peyton Manning is not going to miss a beat, so I wouldn't worry about him. I think that the biggest beneficiary is going to be Emmanuel Sanders, who some people are saying, oh, he's not going to benefit. He plays on the outside, but they're talking about maybe moving him inside. It doesn't really matter where he plays. He's going to get more targets because there's going to be more targets to go around, I think. Also, there's a lot of hype around Cody Latimer. Now, I personally don't think that he's going to be such a huge beneficiary. He was playing behind Andre Caldwell during the preseason. I know that our own Football Guys, Cecil Lammy, is actually pretty high on Latimer, saying that they have some packages for him, but I don't see him really getting that much out of it in the first few weeks anyway. He might kind of play into a bigger role later, show off what he can do, but I don't know. What do you think, Austin?
Well, I think Latimer has higher upside, certainly. He's a big red zone target. I think some of those packages they've been working on for him have to do with red zone targets. I think early in the season we're going to see more Andre Caldwell. I think he's the guy who's got the experience. He's a little higher on the depth chart. And I think that, if Welker had been suspended at the end of the season, I think we'd be talking about Cody Latimer as the big beneficiary here. But I think that Latimer's this long-term stash, and Caldwell is the short-term winner here. What about someone like Jacob Tamme or like a tight end benefiting from this scenario, kind of playing out of the slot?
I don't think it. I mean, maybe Tamme gets some more snaps in the slot, and instead of Emmanuel Sanders or somebody else that might play in the slot. But I don't really think that Tamme's. I mean, if you're playing Tamme, you're pretty desperate. You must be in a 16-team league or something where you have to start 2 tight ends. I would not bother with him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Sanders is a wide receiver 2 this week, so he's a top 20 guy to me. And I think Caldwell, if you're really reaching towards the bottom of your list of guys, then Caldwell could be a good play this week. I think he's probably like a top 40 guy this week. But I don't know if I would play Latimer. I think that's a pretty risky move to try to slot him in this week in his first game.
Yeah, and I'm getting a lot of questions rather about whether or not people should pick up Latimer. And I think he's a worthwhile flyer, but not if you're dropping somebody that's actually going to be playing a lot in the next few weeks. I think that even guys like Jordan Matthews are worth keeping over Latimer or Marcus Wheaton. Those are some of the questions that I've gotten this week. So unless you have a deep bench, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment for sure. What about a couple of the guys that are a little uncertain this week to play? Are you worried at all about Rob Gronkowski or Cam Newton? Belichick has been kind of doing a little double speak this week about whether Gronk's going to play or not. What do you think about these guys?
Well, it's like a roller coaster with Gronk, right? I mean, he's injured the preseason. They say he's going to play week one, and then he's Bill Belichick's like, well, maybe. So I have no idea if what to believe here. I'm hopeful that he's going to play week one. A lot of people are proceeding cautiously because even if he does play in week one, he might be on limited snaps, maybe 40 or 50 snaps. So, if he plays, I think you have to start him. I mean, there's no question. Even if he's playing 40 snaps, 30 even, he's going to be a big red zone target. He's definitely worth playing over whoever you drafted as backup. But I think that I'm more worried about Cam Newton playing at this point. He hasn't practiced. Gronk's been practicing. Newton still hasn't practiced up till now. So we'll see what it's like tomorrow and Friday. But he might not play. And even if he does, he missed most of the offseason. He missed half the preseason, and he's going on the road to play Tampa Bay, who's improved on paper defensively. So I'm not sure that I would play him anyway.
Yeah, I think Newton's big fantasy asset is rushing, and I got to think that wearing a flak jacket and running around out there, he's not going to see as much rushing as he might, say, a month from now. So I got him a little lower in my ranks. I think he does play, and if he's your top quarterback, I don't know that you got a much better choice there. But I don't have high hopes for Newton's rushing yards this week. And
Well, I
with
mean,
Gronk,
it depends because as the preseason wore on, I noticed that Cam Newton was going lower and lower. I mean, I saw somebody got him in the 12th round, which is ridiculous. I got him in the 9th round of a draft a few weeks ago. So I think that if you did draft Cam Newton, there's a good chance you have a good second quarterback. So with so many options, so many even streaming options that might be better. I think that it might be a good idea to stay away from him this week.
yeah, that's fair. I think I've got him as like QB 15 this week in my week one rankings. With Gronkowski, I think even if he plays like 15 or 20 snaps in the red zone, he's still easily a top 5 tight end. I think he's almost guaranteed to get a touchdown every week. So he's got to be in your lineup.
What was it? I mean, Jimmy Graham last year, he had a game where we didn't know if he was going to play. They announced that he was going to play. He had a hurt foot. He wound up playing like a ridiculously low number of snaps, and he had 2 touchdowns on those snaps.
I think it was three. I think it was 3 snaps, 2 touchdowns, or something
Yeah.
ridiculous
So,
like.
I mean, that's kind of ridiculous, but that's the sort of thing that you get with Gronkowski and Graham. It's like if they play, you got to start 'em.
Yeah. Well, moving on to some sort of general week one advice. I've been getting a lot of questions on Twitter about this big matchup tomorrow night with Green Bay traveling to Seattle. And obviously the Packers offense has a lot of high-powered fantasy players, but people are scared off by playing them in Seattle against that tough Legion of Boom. What do you tell people when they get sort of like their studs going up against a tough defensive matchup like this one in Seattle?
Well, don't let the Legion of Boom scare you. It's a fictional, super evil enemy. I can't even.
It sounds like an evil villain.
Never mind. I totally flubbed whatever I was going to say. So anyway,
Doesn't matter. You need to be like sitting there like stroking a cat and like drinking.
I almost opened up the podcast wearing my robe with with a cat here. But anyway.
So you're not worried. Like you would start your Green Bay players here.
Yeah, I think that I do have my rankings are lower on them than they were going into the season. For example, I think I have Aaron Rodgers number 6 at quarterback. I have Eddie Lacy 10th. I have Jordy Nelson, and we'll talk about that more later. I have him way lower than you. So yeah, they do take a hit, but they're still all startable. So I don't think that you stay away from them. You start your studs. That's a golden rule of week one. Start your studs. All of these guys are studs. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think that you should not expect a huge game out of anybody, but I think that you should expect good, consistent output.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And I bumped some of the guys down, but like even if Eddie Lacy is like 12th on my running back list, he's still a guy I'm probably going to end up starting for my fantasy team. It's like these guys just have too much upside and ability to sit him on your bench for someone who's like in the 25 range at wide receiver or running back. That's just not a choice you're going to make.
I will say with Lacey, I keep looking at him and I keep dropping him down a little bit in rankings because the more I think about it, it's like uh, I mean, you still have to start him, but he is going to be on the road against a really good defense, and they're probably going to be behind. So it might be that Lacey doesn't get as much opportunity as you would other games, but even if you drop him down to 15 or so, it's still startable territory. So.
Yeah, I mean the kind of decisions like someone asked me on Twitter today, should I start Eddie Lacy or Joik Bell? And I like Joik Bell, but I would be starting Eddie Lacy over Joik Bell in pretty much any matchup scenario.
Certainly, definitely.
And I'm not saying it's a dumb question to ask. It's this is the week where you might ask that question, but I would still go with Lacy in that scenario. What about diving into some of our rankings? Specifically, you mentioned Jordy Nelson. It looks like I'm higher on him than you are. What about this Seattle matchup specifically has him, looks like you've got him wide receiver 19 this week?
Well, you talked about the Legion of Boom. I think that's going to affect that connection a bit. I know that Richard Sherman doesn't shadow wide receivers, but it's between all that they have a really strong secondary over in Seattle, and I think that's Jordy Nelson will be the most affected out of the group there. I like Randall Cobb. Actually, I have Randall Cobb higher than Nelson this week, particularly for PPR. I think so. That's the main reason. I think that having those big cornerbacks can affect Nelson.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I've got Nelson still inside my top 10 just because I'm not completely psyched about some of those other guys in the same range. But I am expecting a little bit of a down week for Nelson, which I think is still pretty good. So I'm not as worried about it, especially in week one when, Green Bay's a pretty powerful, potent offense here. So I think Nelson's still going to get his in this matchup. What about another receiver, Eric Decker? He's playing a weak Oakland defense this week. Playing for the Jets. Why are you excited about Decker this week? You've got him at wide receiver 17, and I've got him kind of more near my pre-draft rankings, which I've got him at wide receiver 28 this week.
Well, I actually had Decker around that ranking pre-draft as well. So I think I'm kind of sticking with that heading into a good matchup for him. I think that Decker's going to be a big-time red zone target for Geno Smith. Huge upgrade, number one receiver, going to get a lot of targets. And the Raiders are, who knows? I mean, I think they're going to be improved overall, but I don't think they're going to be great. And, they're at home. So I expect a pretty good game out of Decker.
Yeah, I think Decker could see a good game, and I think that's the interesting thing about Week 1 rankings, right? It's some of it is less about what's going on in Week 1, and maybe more where you stood on a player coming into the season. Like, I'm not going to just post up my preseason ranks as the Week 1 ranks, but you definitely have a certain bias based on sort of what you've researched and thought about in the preseason. And so Decker for me was just inside my top 30, and I was like, that's about where I'll keep him for Week 1 and see how things go.
I'm just going to use my preseason rankings the whole year on a weekly basis, even with the bye weeks, and we'll see where that shakes out.
I think it's going to pay big dividends. Big dividends.
Yeah, I'll be the 12th best fantasy ranker for weekly.
Totally. Yeah. We'll do a little experiment, see how that goes. How about Mike Wallace? Miami wide receiver. We're both, full disclosure, we're both Dolphins fans. One of us tends to be a little more optimistic than the other in general, but Mike Wallace is a guy that we're both kind of high on this year in general, but this week in Week 1, we're both a little bit low on him. We both have him around wide receiver 30. Tell me how you feel about Mike Wallace this week.
Well, I mean, it's Darrelle Revis. He's coming to town, and so is he's bringing his island, and I think that Mike Wallace is the guy that's going to suffer. So,
how do you bring an island exactly? Do you tow that with a big tow truck?
Well, they're both on the East Coast, so he usually docks it off of Martha's Vineyard. Well, now that he's up there, and then tows it down. It takes a few days, but I don't know how he gets to St. Louis. That's the only issue. But
man, it must be tough to tug that whole island up like the Mississippi or something. Yeah. I mean, he's not only a great cornerback, but he's also a great strategist when it comes to naval navigation.
Well, yeah, good thing we're not at war in the 1800s. He wouldn't be playing football, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Thank goodness.
Yeah,
Um,
but
so
no,
I,
no.
you know,
So I mean, New England. I like New England's defense this year. I think that Revis makes a huge improvement on that in that secondary. You know, they're not going to have Brandon Browner for the first 4 games, which hurts them. But I think that Wallace, and then that connection is still not quite there. I think I was high on him with Ryan Tannehill in their second season together. They didn't look that great in the preseason. They missed on a handful of deep connections again. So I think it might take a little more time, but definitely this week, I think I'm on the. If you have Wallace, you might want to bench him actually.
yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I'm actually really far out on a limb in my preseason rankings on Mike Wallace. I think I have him as my receiver like 15. He's definitely inside my top 20, and I think most of the consensus has him a little further back, kind of in that 25 to 30 range. So I feel good about him on the season, but not good about him this week. How about let's dive into some quarterbacks here. Tell me about Matthew Stafford. It looks like over at Fantasy Pros, where we both rank, that Stafford is the number 3 consensus quarterback. You have him at 5. I actually have him at 8. Tell me about why Stafford is so high this week.
Well, I mean, the Giants are coming to town. Last I checked, they weren't that good. I think that they're. I think they're better, maybe on paper, but I think that it's a good matchup for Matthew Stafford, and I also think that Calvin Johnson is still playing Detroit. That is true, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's my biggest. Anytime that you have Calvin Johnson on your team, I think you're going to be ranked pretty high for me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think one of the interesting things I noticed as I was looking at the rankings for Fantasy Pros versus Football Guys is that there's sort of a subtle difference in the scoring system that can make a big difference in my rankings. I feel like there's a lot of quarterbacks that are nestled close together in terms of their projections, and if you're in a league that has 1 point for every 25 passing yards, that benefits the rushing quarterbacks a little bit more. And if you're getting 1 point for every 20 passing yards, then it's going to benefit the passing quarterbacks more. And that sounds like a subtle difference, but when you really look at the projections, to me, that's the difference between putting a guy like Stafford high versus a little bit lower. So in the Fantasy Pros rankings world, it's a 25 yards for a point. And so I've got him a little bit lower. We've been favoring some of the guys who get a little bit more rushing, like, say, a Nick Foles. He's not a crazy rusher, but he's certainly, not the statue that Matthew Stafford is. So I've got Nick Foles as my number 3 quarterback this week.
But Stafford's not a statue. I mean, he can run if he needs to. I think you remember that he had that rushing touchdown where he snuck the ball over.
He leaned forward. He was at the half-yard line. He held it out like he was a waiter or something. Like, here's your waters.
Yeah.
That was not a rushing touchdown. That was like a leaning touchdown. I mean, it was a gutsy play, and it was a heady play, and it was fantastic. But and it was great because it was against Dallas. Sorry, Dallas fans. But yeah, that was not a mobile quarterback move.
Run it for 30 yards and touchdown.
Right. Well, clearly I'm the one who's out on a limb here, dropping him down to quarterback 8 because the consensus loves them some Matthew Stafford this week. And speaking of Nick Foles, I've got him pretty high, and you're a little bit lower on him this week. You've got him at QB 10, whereas I've got him at QB 3. Tell me how you're feeling about Nick Foles.
I think the sheen is wearing off on Nick Foles a little bit. He had that incredible season last year, and I think he's going to have a good year again. But I don't think he's this great quarterback that a lot of people seem to make him out to be. I think he's a really good quarterback that works really well with the Chip Kelly system. That's not to say he won't have a huge game. I think being 10th is not terrible, but I think that this is going to be LaShawn McCoy's weekend. I think against the Jaguars, are going to get out to a big lead early using McCoy, and I think that they're pretty much going to stiff on the Jaguars the rest of the way with the running game. So I don't expect a huge game out of Foles this weekend anyway.
Yeah, I could see them getting up big and that maybe capping Foles' upside, but I sort of feel like in that Chip Kelly offense that they're going to score a lot of points from all kinds of angles no matter what. And my thing with Foles is that he was the number 2 fantasy player behind Peyton Manning as soon as he took over for Mike Vick last year. And I'm not expecting him to put up those same kind of numbers because his TD to interception ratio was ridiculous and he got lucky on a few deep balls. But even if you sort of regress some of that craziness, I still feel like he's a top 5 quarterback on the season. And so I'm going to regularly have him pretty high in my rankings. And this seemed like one of those weeks with Aaron Rodgers, having a tough matchup, and guys like Cam Newton hurt, who I'm a little bit higher on than most people. He seemed like an opportunity for me to get him up high in my rankings this week. So we'll see whether they score passing touchdowns, even if they get up big. That could be a concern. I could see that. How about Frank Gore? We're both really high on Frank Gore this week, looking at some of these running backs. Well, what's your excitement about the old man there in San Francisco?
Well, you're more excited than I am. You have him ranked higher than I do, and I thought I was high on him. So,
yeah.
I tell you what, Dallas's defense looked terrible this preseason, and not to say, it's just preseason, but they gave up the most rushing yards, and the most rushing touchdowns this preseason. Frank Gore's coming to town. I expect the 49ers to run a lot, and I like him a lot. I have him ranked 15th. So, I got a question today about starting Frank Gore over some other people who I would not play, and I immediately Frank Gore. I think that he's a must start, and I think we'll talk about this later. He's a great daily fantasy value.
Yeah, or in an eliminator game where you have to pick a player only once per season. I think this is the highest I will have him ranked all season. I have him at 11th. I'm really excited about Gore in week 1. He doesn't have any sort of nicks or scrapes or anything that you might worry about with an older running back yet. He seems to be at full steam. And, yeah, those Cowboys look terrible on defense, just brutal. So I'm excited about Gore this week.
The only concern there is Carlos Hyde, who did look good this preseason as well. So he might take away some of Gore's touches, which is why maybe I'm not quite as high on him as you are. But I think Gore's going to have a great game no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's a fair concern. I like Hyde a lot, but man, I think Gore's going to just come out of the gate strong in this first game. What about Mark Ingram? You've got him at running back 33, and I've got him at running back 41. This may be one of those cases where it may have something to do with how we ranked him in the preseason. Like, tell me about how you had him ranked in the preseason a little bit.
Are they startable at that point? At 33, is Mark Ingram startable for most people? Probably not. And
yeah.
Definitely not at 41. But I think that Ingram, I'm kind of buying into his preseason a little bit. I think that he looked really good. And, I'm not totally sold on him, but I think that the Saints might be using him more, and that he's not going to be using the passing game, but, more having him in the game more just means more fantasy opportunities. So I think that, against Atlanta, we'll see. It might be a shootout. He might not get into the game as much, but I think that maybe going forward, he might even be better than that.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah. How about let's move through a few of these others. Let's get to some tight ends. How about Jordan Cameron? Jordan Cameron is a guy that I was been really high on this offseason. I think he's going to get a lot of targets with Josh Gordon out of that offense. I have him as my tight end number 2 this week, but that also speaks to my preseason rankings. I had him at tight end number 4, but him and Gronk and Julius Thomas I had grouped very closely together. I'm very high on Jordan Cameron. Tell me what you've got him at tight end 7. It's not like you're concerned about him, but why are you not like as psyched as I am about Jordan Cameron?
Well, 2 things. First of all, Norv Turner's gone, so I think that hurts him a little bit. I don't have no love for Norv Turner as a head coach, but he's done a really good job as an offensive coordinator. He made Jordan Cameron into a star last year, and he's now in Minnesota. So I think that hurts him a little bit. And Josh Gordon is gone for the year anyway, barring any sort of crazy development in the next few days. And I think that actually hurts Cameron. I know that it might mean a few more targets, but that also means a lot more defensive attention. I think that opposing defenses are not. He doesn't have the element of surprise like he did at the beginning of last year, when people were like, who's Jordan Cameron? What's he doing? Not that. That's kind of overblown, right? teams plan. But
what is the water boy doing in here? What the heck?
I thought this was Cameron Jordan, not Jordan Cameron. What is this?
So confusing.
But no, I think that teams will be paying a little bit more defensive attention to him too. So, seventh is not that low, but I do think he takes a hit this year.
Yeah, and that may be why you're higher on Kyle Rudolph. You've got the North Turner effect traveling over to Minnesota. Is that the big change there for Rudolph, and why you have him as your tight end 5?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that that is a big effect. I think that Rudolph is primed for a big year. Hopefully, better quarterbacking will help him. I think he's been affected by having to deal with Christian Ponder most of that time. So, having North Turner there, and now Matt Castle, who's he's not Tom Brady, but he's better than Christian Ponder, and maybe Teddy Bridgewater later this year. I like him, but for this week, I think he's going to have a good game.
Yeah, I'm a little lower on Rudolph just because I feel like he's so touchdown dependent and he's going to be a little bit less consistent. I've got him at tight end 12. But a guy that I have ahead of him that I'm real excited about is Travis Kelce in Kansas City. Maybe this is another situation where you're like, well, Dwayne Bowe is out, so he's going to receive a lot more defensive attention. I'm looking at it again going like, he's like all they've got. Like, he's got to get a ton of targets in this game. Obviously, they can pass to Jamal Charles as well, but like, holy cow, like running deeper routes or whatever out in midfield, mid to long range routes. Kelsey's going to be the guy this week. I've got him at tight end 10. Why do you have him at tight end 22? You're not buying the preseason hype?
I love Travis Kelce. I think he is the future, the future in Kansas City. I think he's gonna be good. But
more so than Donnie Avery? How is that possible?
For two things. Anthony Fasano is a starting tight end right now, so I know that might change soon, and I know that doesn't mean that Kelce won't get on the field, but that means less snaps for Kelce than he would be as the number one. And Alex Smith is a quarterback, unfortunately, so I think that he had a lot of success this preseason, but that was with Chase Daniel at quarterback. That's not to say Smith will completely ignore him, but I don't think. I just don't think he's going to have a big first week. I think that in the next, maybe if he proves himself as the season goes on, I like his odds to be crack the top 12, but not the first week.
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like we agree at least long term. I'm excited about Kelce and what I hope to see on the field this season.
We're gonna move on in a second now, but one guy that I just popped into my head for week 1 is Junior Hemingway, wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, because Bo's suspended rather, for week 1. He's kind of a guy that's on nobody's radar, and if you were desperate for a wide receiver, I think he's going to be the number 2 receiver this weekend. So
there's also been talk that they've been kind of talking about a few different guys there, and I was wondering if it's going to be him or if maybe it's going to be Frankie Hammond. That's another guy they've been mentioning, maybe taking the Bo slot and lining up.
Did they find him like singing, fronting a cover band at the local bar or something? It's Frankie Hammond.
It's Frankie Hammond and the Dreamers. Yeah. He's really good at covering the Beatles. That's his angle right there. Football player and cover band expert. He's dual threat like Darrelle Revis. Good at moving islands and naval stuff. Yeah, he's like a naval admiral as well as a great cornerback. These guys are multi-talented.
Army admiral.
Right. Yes, exactly. That would be way different. So yeah, that's why these guys get paid the big bucks. I mean, I don't question it.
Tell the difference between the Navy and the Army.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Exactly. They're smart. So let's talk about some streaming defenses real quick, and then we'll get into some daily fantasy sports for you DraftKings and FanDuel fans. Who do you have your eye on for streaming defenses this week?
I really like 2 teams, which apparently everybody likes, so I don't know that you're going to get them at this point. But, Pittsburgh against Cleveland at home with Brian Hoyer at quarterback, no Josh Gordon, the aforementioned Jordan Cameron not being as good as you think he's going to be. And then Jets at home against Oakland. I like them a lot. One other team that is kind of under the radar, you might be able to snag them, is the Detroit Lions playing at home against the Giants. And Eli Manning is the quarterback for the Giants, and he's going to throw interceptions. So I think that's a good play.
Yeah, and they have a strong defensive line there too. I think it's a good call for streaming. I like the Jets the best out of those three picks. Derek Carr looked good in the preseason, but that wasn't preseason can be misleading. I think the rookie's going to have a tough time with his first outing traveling to the East Coast.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be either a rude awakening for Derek Carr or all of a sudden the birth of a star. Because I'm probably is going to be the former. It's not, I don't think he's going to fare too well.
Yeah, I agree. So, talking about some daily fantasy sports, DFS, the day gaming. Alex, you had a chance to do a little research here and look at some of the price points you liked on a few players. We'll maybe touch on two or three players at each site that you like before we run out of time here. But for those of you who haven't played daily fantasy sports, basically it's a draft your team with a salary cap for 1 week of games and then completely throw it away, and then you can draft a new team the next week. You can win prizes, win money, win cash money. There's a lot of free rolls early in the season that you can get buy-ins and try some contests for free where you can still win cash. It's kind of a fun format where you don't have sort of the long season commitment and have to deal with like injuries and things like that quite as much as you would in a traditional league. How do you feel about daily fantasy sports, Alex?
I'm still waiting for them to start taking Bitcoin.
I think you're going to be waiting for a while.
Bitcoin. I just know that it exists.
Maybe not for long.
Minecraft. Do you get Bitcoins in Minecraft? I don't know.
I think you get Domino's pizza coupons as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like the daily fantasy is really fun. If you'd love the drafting experience, it's not quite the same, but it's fun to just kind of pick a lineup every week. There are some really serious players who pick hundreds of lineups every week, and I don't know how they have the time to do that. I have no time to do that, so I only play a few, but it's really fun.
Yeah, it's fun. Totally, it is. And DraftKings and FanDuel are the two big players in this scene. There's tons of sites that do day gaming, but they're kind of the two biggest that do it. Let's start with DraftKings. Basically, their rule setup is it's a PPR league. There's a flex position and there's no kicker. And so you're picking a lineup of 9 guys: a quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a flex, and a defense. Tell me, you've looked at some of these prices and found a couple players you like. Who are maybe 2 or 3 that really stand out to you?
Well, we talked about Frank Gore earlier, and I think that on especially DraftKings, he's got a great value. He's 5,200, which I don't have the max, the highest number in front of me right now, but it was a good deal when I was looking at it, and so I think that he's one of the best deals out there this weekend on DraftKings. And maybe,
to put it into perspective, Jamal Charles is 9,000, so it's
right.
About 60% maybe of Jamal Charles' value.
So for the bang for your buck, I think you're getting a lot for Gore. And another guy that I really like, I'm looking at, I have a list of guys that I liked. I like Reggie Wayne. He was 5,100. He's a good. I think that the Colts. I mean, obviously we don't know exactly what we're going to get from Wayne coming back from injury, but the Colts are going into Denver. They're probably going to have to pass a lot, and he's the number 1 receiver there. So I think that he's going to have a pretty good game, personally, and I think that's a good value.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm also looking at a couple of these defensive picks here. I'm a little curious of what the pricing is on those. It looks like Detroit maybe is an interesting one. They're at 3,300. I don't know. The top defense is only 4,000, so that's not exactly a huge value, but
yeah, there's not much difference there, so it's not so it's not like saving $5,000. But
right. Well, how about over at FanDuel? The format over at FanDuel is they don't have a flex. Instead, they have a kicker, and it's a half-point PPR. So the rules are slightly different. You've still got 9 starters that you're picking for your team. What were some of the value you saw over there? And obviously, it's a different set of salaries. So one guy could be good on one side, and he might not be a good buy on another side. So what do you see over at FanDuel?
Yeah, some interesting differences. I thought that Andre Ellington was a pretty good deal at FanDuel. Not so much at DraftKings, but I thought that you could get Ellington for a pretty good price over at FanDuel. And I think that for me, I like Ellington more than a lot of people. I think that he's going to have a big season. So top 10 season at running back perhaps at least in PPR formats. And so at 6,800, I thought that was a great deal.
Yeah, Jamal Charles is 9,800 over there, and I had Ellington as my 11th running back in my preseason ranks, so I'm on board with that, man. That seems like a great value this week.
Yeah, and you could find these values over at DraftKings too, but I like Kyle Rudolph and Antonio Gates a lot at 5,700, 5,600 combined, and Gates is even cheaper over at DraftKings. I think that he's a lot of people are on the Ladarius Green train. I'm not. I think that Gates has got one more year left in him, at least until he's breaks down, and I think he's a good deal.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've got Gates ahead of Green in my preseason ranks. I mean, I'm not like high on Gates, but when you can get him for only 3,400 over at DraftKings, that might be a position you sort of skimp on to buy some value at other positions in your lineup. Cool. Any other things you noticed over at the day gaming sites? Any other players that jumped out at you?
I mean, if you're really looking for a cheap quarterback, I think Josh McCown is a good pickup. He's 5,600 over at DraftKings and 6,200 over at FanDuel. And, he's the starting quarterback over in Tampa Bay. He's got a lot of weapons, and I think that the Carolina defenses might be a little shaky. They got a good defensive front, but they lost some players all over the place. So I think that McCown could have a pretty good game and have a lot of return on investment.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Well, hey, that is pretty much all the content we have for our premiere episode of the 9 Route. Any closing thoughts? Any words of wisdom for week 1?
Don't panic. Don't make crazy trades after you lose. If you lose week 1 or somebody goes down, already people are panicking with this Welker news. So, just calm down. If you get something good, then yes, go for it. But just tread lightly. It's only the first week.
Yeah, that's true. If the guy that you drafted to be great or one of your starters has a couple of slow weeks to start the season, just sit tight at least through the first 2 games, maybe even the first 3 games. Don't hit the panic button and trade for 50 cents on the dollar just because someone has a bad game. It's gonna happen to even the best players.
Now, on the other end of that, definitely try to take advantage of people who are panicking. That goes without saying. I think everybody does that, but go after Aaron Rodgers after he has a so-so game in Seattle.
That's an excellent point, especially if they have 2 bad games to start the season. Some owners will panic after week 2, and you're just like, that's a perfect opportunity to get a guy on the cheap. All right, man. Well, Alex, it is great to be back podcasting with you, back on the Hangouts, the Google Hangouts, talking about fantasy football, and I look forward to doing it every week, every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Pacific with you this season. If you want to hang out with us and chat with us, you can find Alex on Twitter at Alex Miglio. And if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at Austin NFL. You can also find our show, The 9 Route, at The 9 Route on Twitter. Be sure to catch all of our content over at Football Guys, where we write. And we're on Facebook, we're on Google+, and we're going to post this to iTunes, and we'll be sure to keep you in touch and let you know all the things we have coming up. Hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions on Twitter on our next podcast, and we look forward to interacting with you even more in the future. So until next time, thank you for listening to The 9 Route. May your players stay healthy, your sleepers wake up, and your Monday nights be filled with miraculous comebacks.
Yes, a worthy benediction.